Welcome to this short video on modeling made easy in Tekla Structural Designer. In this video, we'll show you how to model members using convenient snap points and the Infill Beam command. TSD has several tools to make modeling quick and easy. We recommend creating a template file for your company and starting from there. This is an example template that we've created. Contact our support department if you'd like us to send you this file. The template will allow us to quickly model members. It also helps you to standardize your company and make sure everyone's working off the same point. This model already has the grid lines defined. These are easily created with our grid wizards, brought in from a DXF, or from Revit. Before modeling, set up the construction levels. Here you can set levels to be duplicates of a reference level. That way you only need to model one time, add loads to one level, and the information will be copied above to all duplicated levels. At any time, you can come back here and set the levels to unique to make changes to individual plans. Even if your levels are mostly the same, you can take advantage by modeling the bulk of the members one time. To draw the columns, we can click on intersecting grid lines or draw a window. Columns will be placed at every intersecting grid line within that window. Notice we're modeling in a 2D plan view and we can see the 3D view side by side. Move to the first floor plan to model the beams. This time I'll select one of the saved property sets in my template file. This is a typical composite beam that already has the properties set up based on what I'd like to see for composite design, including deflection limits, camber, percent composite action, and shear stud layout settings. Again, we can simply draw a window around the columns and the beams will be automatically placed between every column. You can also manually draw a beam by snapping to two intersecting grid lines or tops of columns. For the remaining perimeter beams, I'm going to change to a typical non-composite wide flange property, then draw windows around these perimeter corners to add those girders. TSD will color code the beams so that I can quickly tell which are composite in yellow and which are non-composite in blue. Notice in the 3D view the framing members are created on all three levels even though I've only modeled on a single level. There are useful snap tools when drawing individual beams. Hover over a girder to get snap points at third point, quarter point, and midpoint of the beam. You can then easily snap to it as you start drawing the new beam. Hover over the next girder to get the same snap points. For inclined members, you'll also get orthogonal points, a point perpendicular to the beam that I'm framing from, and another perpendicular to the beam I'm framing to, designated by the dotted line. You can also define an exact dimension along the girder where you want to frame to. Hit F2 on your keyboard. You can then input a dimension from the start of the beam, or use Tab to input a dimension from the end of the beam. To determine the start and end of the beam, turn on the direction in scene content. An arrow will show up and that will designate the start and end of the beam in the direction of the arrow. In the Edit ribbon, the Infill Beam command will make modeling interior beams quick and easy. Draw a window to select the bays that you want to draw the beams in. Here too, you can select from the predefined property sets. There are three types of options for quickly generating beams. The first is by number. Here you indicate how many beams per bay and the program will automatically evenly space them in each bay. Hover over the framing members to get a preview of what will be generated. Depending where you place the mouse will determine how the beams are laid out. The next option is by spacing. Click on the input box and select the button. Now you can input specific spacing separated by a comma. This will determine the spacing between the beams, not from a reference point at the end of the bay. You can also set up an exact spacing for several beams. For example, if you want all your beams spaced at 2 feet on center, but you don't know how many beams will fit in each bay, you can enter an expression, use a larger number to ensure you have enough beams. For example, 20 times 2 feet. The program will put in as many beams as it can, space at exactly 2 feet, and stop at the end of the closed bay. The final option is by max spacing. Here you input maximum spacing between beams. The program will fit in as many beams as it can in the bay, and that spacing will not exceed this value. If you input 5 feet, the spacing could be 4 foot 11 3/8. that will be evenly spaced and the spacing will not exceed 5 feet. For angled bays, you also have the option to set the direction of the beams as perpendicular or parallel to a left or right face. Now you can span the infill beams referenced off of that angled girder. All of these modeling commands can also be performed in an elevation view. We can create an elevation view of any grid line and then open that view just like any plan view. This way you can quickly add kickers or braces to snap points along the column or at specific locations along the column, pressing F2 on your keyboard and typing in a location. We can also use the Infill Beam command for columns to lay out wall studs. And this works in the same way that we saw for beams. Finally, TSD has useful wizards to model typical braced frames. Select from a typical brace layout, then snap to the 4 corners of the braced frame. The program will generate the braces accordingly. Once you model the braced frame, you can then select it, hold Control on your keyboard to select multiple frames at once, then right-click on your mouse and choose Copy. Snap to a reference point. Now you can snap to a new point to copy all of the braced frames to a new location. That brings us to the end of this short video on modeling in Tekla Structural Designer. Our tools make it quick and easy to model your next structure.